A breath of diesel hung in the air as my coffee cooled in my hand. The sun was just slicing through the fence slats, and right there by the curb, my brand new mailbox stood at an ugly angle, metal bent like it lost a fight with a drunk tractor. I blinked twice, rubbed my eyes. No use. It was real, not some leftover nightmare. Up the street, Karen and Kendra leaned on their porch railing. Their matching blonde ponytails bobbed when they waved at me. "Nice mailbox, Pete," Karen hollered, loud enough for half the block to hear. Her laugh stuck in my ears like sand. Kendra smirked, tapped her phone. I breathed in, tasted burnt rubber on my tongue. Let me set the scene. This was the second mailbox I'd put up that month. The first, just a plain metal thing, lasted 4 days before someone played bumper cars after midnight. The new one, reinforced steel post, 3 bags of concrete, overkill for a box, but it was supposed to say, "I won't back down." Now it looked like a drunk wrestler tried to hug a stop sign. I started toward the wreck. That's when I heard tires rolling slow behind me, city inspector's gray van, door sliding open like a threat. Out steps Danny, clipboard hugged to his chest, blue polo tucked into khaki pants. He squinted at my mailbox, pretending he didn't see the tire marks gouged across the grass. "Morning, Mr. Reed," he said, his voice a little nervous, digging his heel into the dirt. "We received a complaint. Your mailbox is in violation." I stared at him. Violation? Somebody just tried to turn it into scrap metal. Funny thing is, Danny didn't flinch. He flipped the clipboard. "We got photos submitted last night, before this incident. See? Your foundation's 3 inches past the city line. That's not permitted." He handed me the grainy printouts. Sure enough, my mailbox untouched, shining under the streetlight at exactly the wrong angle. "You gotta move it, Mr. Reed. 24 hours. There's a fine, too." His voice dropped like he was glad to get it over with. I felt my blood rise. Across the yard, Karen called out again, saccharine voice. "Guess some neighbors actually read the rules." She and Kendra looked at each other and burst out laughing. My hands clenched the coffee cup. My thumb twitched. "Didn't see you out here measuring last night," I said, keeping my tone flat. Danny shook his head, backing away. "Sorry, rules are rules." That's when my phone buzzed. Text from Tom, neighbor for 2 decades. "Saw the inspector? Everything all right?" I thought about answering, decided not to. My mailbox was mangled, my pride took another hit. And now, even the city joined the circus. Here's the kicker. I caught a faint chemical tang, like hydraulic fluid, mixed with cheap perfume. That told me all I needed to know. Tractor job. Karen, or maybe Kendra. They had this way of planning things, leaving just enough rope for you to hang yourself. I tried pulling the box straight, but the steel post was mangled deep in the concrete. My fingers left dark smudges on the metal. Just then, Debbie from the corner diner trotted over, the soles of her shoes squeaking on the dew-wet grass. "Trouble again?" she asked, keeping her eyes low. Debbie's voice was soft, shaky. She'd seen plenty in her years slinging coffee, but not this. "Those sisters rented a tractor," Mark told me. "They said it was for a stump, but Mark swore there's no stump on their lot." Her words came out in a hush. She wouldn't have risked talking if she didn't care. Let me tell you, that sort of thing sticks in your mind. I brushed off my jeans. "Thanks, Debbie. You ever see someone do this much work just to win a petty fight?" She shrugged. "Some people just like making trouble." Her hand lingered on my arm before she walked away. The sun caught her gray hair, made her look braver than she wanted to be. 6 hours passed, and every minute felt heavier. Knock at the door, Tom again, this time not alone. Pastor Hill stepped up, collar stiff, eyes like judgment. 3 other neighbors hovered in the yard. "Pete, we need to talk," Pastor said. His voice was low but sharp. "Community's been hearing things." Tom cleared his throat. "Kids are afraid to walk by your place. Wives say you're trying to stir up trouble. Karen said you threatened her." I blinked, anger clawing my ribs. "I threatened nobody. They crushed my mailbox. Twice." But the pastor shook his head. "Perception is reality, Pete. We can't have this kind of tension." His hands clasped, knuckles white. Karen watched from her porch, her lips curled. "Maybe Pete should apologize," she called. Kendra just filmed it all, camera pointed in my direction. I wanted to yell, to call them out for their lies, but my throat locked up. The crowd started to murmur, drifting away one by one. I was left on my stoop, coffee gone cold, mailbox ruins glinting in the sun. Truth be told, there's a moment when you realize nobody's coming to rescue you. The smell of diesel, a broken box, and a laughing crowd makes you ask yourself, what would you do if everyone turned their back? The blue van hummed past one more time. Danny glanced up, didn't meet my eyes. Wind stirred papers at my feet, and that's how the game began. The yellow tape hit me like a punch to the gut. I walked outside at dawn expecting another normal day, maybe some quiet time to think through my next move. Instead, my yard looked like a crime scene. 2 squad cars, lights flashing red and blue across the white siding of my house. Officer Mills stood by my destroyed mailbox, arms crossed, radio crackling on his shoulder. Danny the inspector pointed at twisted metal fragments scattered on the grass. "Peter Reed," Mills called out. His voice was all business, no warmth. I nodded, wiping sleep from my eyes. Coffee hadn't even finished brewing. "You're under arrest for destruction of municipal property and creating a public hazard." The handcuffs came out before I could process what he'd said. "Wait, what? I didn't destroy anything. Someone else..." But Mills wasn't listening. He grabbed my wrist, metal clicking cold around my skin. "See, here's what happened while I slept. Karen filed a police report claiming I'd gone into a rage, taken a sledgehammer to my own mailbox just to frame her and Kendra, said I was mentally unstable and dangerous to the community. She had photos of me standing next to the wreckage yesterday, looking angry. Course, she left out the part where her tractor did the damage. Smart move, twisted the whole story. The worst part? People were watching. Mrs. Chin from across the street peeked through her curtains. Tom stood on his driveway in his bathrobe, shaking his head like I'd disappointed him personally. And there on the porch, Karen and Kendra filmed everything on their phones, whispering to each other, pointing. Karen wore this satisfied smile, the kind you get when a long plan finally works out. Mills pushed my head down, guided me into the back of the cruiser. Vinyl seats, smell of disinfectant and stale cigarettes. Through the window, I watched Danny bag pieces of my mailbox as evidence. The irony burned my stomach. They were arresting me for being the victim of vandalism, using the vandalism itself as proof I was guilty. Think about that for a second. How do you defend yourself when the crime becomes the evidence against you? At the station, they stuck me in a gray room with a metal table and fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps. Mills sat across from me, opened a manila folder thick with photos. "Mr. Reed, neighbors say you've been escalating this mailbox situation for weeks, threatening behavior, property damage, disturbing the peace." He slid the photos toward me. There I was, red-faced, pointing at my broken mailbox. Another shot of me talking to Debbie, looking conspiratorial. A third showing me with a hammer in my garage, taken through my window sometime when I wasn't looking. "This is garbage," I said, pushing the photos back. "Someone's been watching my house, taking pictures without permission. That's not evidence. That's stalking." Mills leaned back in his chair. "Witnesses say you admitted to planning retaliation. Quote, 'I won't back down.' That sound familiar?" He tapped his pen against the table, each click like a tiny hammer. "Premeditation, Mr. Reed, makes this a felony." The room felt smaller with each word. My chest tightened. Outside the window I could see the parking lot. Normal people going about their normal days while I sat in handcuffs for a crime I didn't commit. Have you ever felt like the whole world just shifted sideways and left you behind? That's where I was, trapped in someone else's lie, watching it become everyone else's truth. Then Mills dropped the real bomb. "Here's what we think happened. You got frustrated with the mailbox situation, destroyed your own property in a fit of rage, scattered the pieces to make it look like vandalism, but you cut yourself on the metal." He pointed to a small bandage on my knuckle, from fixing a loose gutter bracket 2 days ago. "Blood evidence, Mr. Reed. DNA doesn't lie." I stared at him. "You think I beat up my own mailbox and bled on it just to fake a crime?" Mills nodded like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "People do crazy things when they're angry, especially when they think they can get away with it." The fluorescent light buzzed louder. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. sitting on my kitchen counter in a house I might not see again for a while. The phone call came at 11, Debbie's voice shaking. "Pete, I'm so sorry. Mark found something in the tractor. Kendra left her ID badge in the cab, and there's video from the gas station showing them filling up the morning your mailbox got hit." She paused, breathing heavy. Mark's scared to come forward. They threaten to destroy his rental business if he talks. But I recorded him saying it, every word. When she said that, something clicked. Not hope exactly, but the first crack of light in a very dark room. Mills had left me alone to think about my options. But what I was really thinking about was diesel fuel, missing ID badges, and two sisters who had gotten sloppy. Truth is, criminals always make mistakes. The smart ones make small ones. The stupid ones, they get careless when they think they've already won. And that phone call was about to change everything. The courthouse smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. I sat in the defendant's chair, orange jumpsuit scratching my neck, watching Karen and Kendra whisper to their lawyer. Both sisters wore identical black pantsuits, hair pulled back in matching buns. They looked like corporate twins, all business and confidence. Their attorney, some sharp-faced guy in an expensive suit, shuffled through papers like he was already counting his fee. Judge Martinez called the session to order, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. The state versus Peter Reed. Charges of destruction of municipal property and creating a public hazard. She looked tired, like she'd seen this same story a dozen times. The prosecutor, a young woman with wire-rimmed glasses, stood up first. "Your Honor, the defendant willfully destroyed city property in a fit of rage, then attempted to frame innocent neighbors for the crime. Let me tell you something about being innocent in a courtroom. It doesn't matter much when everyone's already decided you're guilty." The prosecutor laid out her case like she was reading a grocery list. Photos of me looking angry, witness statements about my threatening behavior, blood evidence on the mailbox fragments, each piece of evidence stacked up neat and clean, building a wall I couldn't see over. Karen took the stand first, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "He's been harassing us for months," she said, voice trembling just right. "Yelling across the yard, making threats. We were terrified." The prosecutor nodded sympathetically. "Did you witness the destruction of the mailbox?" Karen shook her head. "We heard the noise around midnight, crashing, banging. In the morning, we saw the damage and called the city inspector immediately. We knew Pete would try to blame us. The whole performance was flawless." Karen's voice cracked at the right moments. Her hands shook when she described feeling unsafe in our own home. Even I might have believed her if I hadn't lived through the real version. Kendra backed up every detail, adding her own touches about my unstable behavior and dangerous mood swings. Two sisters, one story, perfectly coordinated. Then it was my turn. My public defender, an overwhelmed kid fresh out of law school, asked me to explain what really happened. I told the truth about the tractor damage, the diesel smell, the suspicious timing, but without proof, it sounded desperate. The prosecutor tore me apart on cross-examination. "So, you're claiming these two middle-aged women somehow acquired heavy machinery and vandalized your property at midnight? Does that sound reasonable to you, Mr. Reed?" The judge leaned forward, frowning. "Mr. Reed, the physical evidence contradicts your story. Your blood is on the mailbox fragments. The damage pattern is consistent with repeated hammer strikes, not vehicle impact." She gestured to the photos spread across her desk. "Can you explain how your DNA ended up at the scene if you weren't involved in the destruction?" My throat went dry. The courtroom felt smaller, walls pressing in. In the gallery, I spotted Tom and Pastor Hill, both shaking their heads. Even Debbie sat 3 rows back, looking like she wanted to disappear. That's when the weight hit me. I was about to be convicted for a crime I didn't commit, and the real criminals were sitting 10 feet away crying fake tears. But right as Judge Martinez raised her gavel, the back doors of the courtroom slammed open. Debbie stumbled in, dragging Mark behind her. He looked terrified, clutching a small plastic bag and what appeared to be a tablet computer. "Your Honor," Debbie called out, her voice cutting through the murmur. "We have evidence, real evidence." The judge paused, gavel frozen midair. Karen's face went white. Kendra actually turned around in her seat, mouth falling open. The prosecutor jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. These individuals weren't on the witness list." But Judge Martinez waved her quiet. "I'll allow it. Approach the bench." Mark's hands shook as he opened the plastic bag. Inside was a laminated ID badge, Kendra's work identification from the county water department. "She left this in my tractor cab," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "The one they rented to remove a stump that doesn't exist." He fumbled with the tablet, pulled up a video file. "Gas station security footage. Shows them filling up my tractor at 6 a.m. right before the mailbox got destroyed." The video was grainy, but clear enough. There was Kendra pumping diesel into the tractor's tank while Karen stood lookout. Timestamp showed 6:17 a.m. My mailbox got hit sometime between 6:30 and 7. The math was simple, brutal, undeniable. Judge Martinez studied the footage, then looked hard at the sisters. "Counsel, I'd like an explanation for this new evidence." Karen's lawyer went pale, shuffling papers frantically. Karen herself had gone completely silent, staring at her hands. But Kendra stood up and pointed right at me. "He planted that badge!" she screamed. "He's trying to frame us. This is exactly the kind of manipulative behavior we've been dealing with." Her voice cracked, desperation bleeding through the act. "Your Honor, he obviously broke into our house, stole my ID, and—" "Sit down, Ms. Mitchell," Judge Martinez said, her voice ice cold. The courtroom went dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning cycling on, someone's stomach growling in the back row. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. What happened next changed everything, and I mean everything. The judge's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Ms. Mitchell, you just admitted knowing about a break-in that was never reported to police. How exactly would you know someone broke into your home to plant evidence unless you were already aware this ID badge was missing?" Kendra's face crumpled. She looked at her sister, then at their lawyer, like a drowning woman reaching for a rope that wasn't there. Karen grabbed Kendra's arm, whispered something sharp in her ear. But the damage was done. Judge Martinez had 20 years on the bench. She knew panic when she saw it. "Furthermore," she continued, "if this badge was planted as you claim, why didn't you notice it was missing from your personal effects? Most people know when their work ID disappears." The prosecutor tried to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defense should have disclosed." But Mark stepped forward, tablet still glowing in his hands. "There's more," he said, voice stronger now. "Audio recording from when they rented the tractor. They specifically asked about crushing metal posts. Said they needed to know if it could handle something stubborn." He pressed play. Karen's voice crackled through the courtroom speakers. "We need to make sure this thing can knock down a thick metal post, like really thick, steel and concrete." Mark's voice responded, "What kind of project you ladies working on?" A pause, then Kendra. "Stump removal. Big stubborn stump. Been there for years." The courtroom buzzed. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Holy shit!" Judge Martinez slammed her gavel. "Order!" She stared hard at the sisters, who now looked like caught shoplifters, guilty, defiant, and out of options. "Counselor, does your client wish to revise her testimony?" That's when Karen made her final mistake. She stood up, face flushed red, and pointed at me. "This is ridiculous. He's obviously manipulated these people. Can't you see what's happening? He's been planning this whole thing." Her voice rose to a shriek. "He destroyed his own property just to make us look bad. That's exactly the kind of sick, twisted—" "Enough!" Judge Martinez banged the gavel so hard it echoed like a gunshot. "Ms. Mitchell, you're out of order. Sit down immediately or I'll hold you in contempt." But Karen kept going, completely unhinged now. "You don't understand. This man has been harassing us for months, following us, taking pictures, threatening." The prosecutor grabbed Karen's arm, tried to pull her back to her seat. Karen shook her off, wild-eyed and desperate. "He planted that badge. He manipulated that recording. Can't anyone see what he's doing?" Spit flew from her lips. Her perfect composure had shattered completely. Judge Martinez stood up, face stone cold. "Bailiff, restrain the witness." Two uniformed officers moved toward Karen, who finally seemed to realize she'd gone too far. She sat down hard, breathing like she'd run a marathon. Kendra buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. But here's what nobody expected, not even me. Judge Martinez called for a 30-minute recess. then summoned both legal teams to her chambers. When they came back, the prosecutor looked sick. She stood up slowly, like the words hurt to say. Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Reed. We will be filing new charges against Karen and Kendra Mitchell for filing false reports, perjury, and destruction of property. The courtroom exploded. Karen shot to her feet again, screaming, "This is a setup!" before the bailiff cuffed her hands behind her back. Kendra just sobbed, makeup running down her cheeks in black streaks. Their expensive lawyer packed his briefcase and walked out without a word. His check had probably already bounced anyway. As they led the sisters away, Karen turned back one more time. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom, filled with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. The bailiff pushed her forward, steel doors slamming behind them with a sound like thunder. Judge Martinez dismissed me with an apology and instructions to sue the city for wrongful arrest. The orange jumpsuit came off. My own clothes felt strange after 2 days in jail. But walking out of that courthouse, breathing free air again, that should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt empty, used up, like I'd won a war but lost something I couldn't name. Debbie waited by the courthouse steps, looking older than when this started. Mark stood beside her, still clutching that tablet like a lifeline. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. The ride home was quiet. Debbie drove, Mark in the back seat. Main Street looked the same as always. Family diner, hardware store, post office with the flag hanging limp in the still air. But something had changed. The whole town had watched me get arrested. Watched the sisters lie under oath. Watched the truth come out in pieces. Some things you can't unsee. "Pete," Debbie said as we pulled into my driveway, "I need to tell you something." And the way she said it, I knew my troubles weren't over yet. Debbie's hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to show white knuckles. She stared straight ahead at my front door, not meeting my eyes. "The diner fired me this morning," she said, voice flat and tired. "Mr. Henderson said I was interfering in community matters, and he couldn't have employees who cause drama." She finally looked at me, and I saw 20 years of exhaustion in her face. Karen's family has been eating at that diner since it opened. They spend good money there. Mark shifted in the back seat, clearing his throat. "My rental business is done too. Had 3 cancellations already. Word gets around fast in a small town." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Funny thing, half these people still think you're guilty. Justice in court doesn't change minds on the street." The weight of it hit me like a sledgehammer. These people had saved my life, literally kept me from prison. And now they were paying the price. Debbie had worked at that diner for 15 years. Mark built his business from nothing, one handshake at a time. Both gone because they told the truth about 2 lying sisters. "I'm sorry," I said, and the words felt small and useless. Debbie shook her head. "Don't you apologize. We did what was right. Sometimes right costs more than wrong, but that doesn't make it wrong." She patted my arm. "You go inside, get some rest. We'll figure things out." But as they drove away, I realized something cold and hard. Winning in court meant nothing if you lost everything else. The sisters got arrested, sure, but I was still the guy who caused all that trouble. Still the neighbor who couldn't just let things go. In a town like this, that reputation sticks to you like tar. Inside my house, everything felt different. Mail piled up on the kitchen counter, bills, advertisements, and 3 envelopes with no return address. I opened the first one, single sheet of paper, handwritten in block letters. "You got them arrested, but we know the truth. Move away before something worse happens." The second envelope was worse. Photos of my house taken from different angles, my car in the driveway, me carrying groceries from the store. Someone had been watching, documenting my daily routine. The third envelope just contained a single sentence. "People who cause trouble don't stay safe long." I set the letters down, hands shaking. Through the kitchen window, I could see my neighbor Tom mowing his lawn, careful not to look toward my house. Mrs. Chin had new curtains up, thick ones that blocked her view of my yard completely. Even the mailman, Joey, who used to chat about baseball scores, now just dropped mail and hurried away. The phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Pete Reed?" The voice was unfamiliar, scratchy, disguised. "You think you won something today? You think getting those ladies arrested makes you a hero?" A pause, breathing. "Heroes don't last long around here. Ask your friends at the diner." I hung up, unplugged the landline. My cell phone started buzzing immediately. More unknown numbers. I turned it off, sat in the quiet house, and realized something that made my stomach drop. The sisters might be in jail, but their supporters weren't. Karen and Kendra had friends, family, people who believed their version of events no matter what a judge said. And now, those people knew exactly where I lived. Have you ever won a battle but realized it might cost you the war? That's where I sat, in my kitchen, looking at threatening letters while my real friends paid the price for helping me. The mailbox outside was still twisted wreckage. The yellow crime scene tape was gone, but the damage remained. To my property, my reputation, my sense of safety. That evening, Mark called from a payphone. "Pete, don't go out alone for a while. My cousin works dispatch at the sheriff's office. Says they've had 6 calls today about suspicious activity at your address. All anonymous, all fake, but it puts you on their radar as a problem property." His voice dropped. "Someone's organizing this, making you look unstable so when something bad happens, people will say you brought it on yourself." I walked to the front window, peered through the blinds. Across the street, a car I didn't recognize sat parked under the streetlight. Inside, the silhouette of someone watching my house. When I looked closer, they started the engine and drove away slowly, taillights disappearing around the corner. The house felt like a trap. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow moving past the windows made my heart race. I'd gotten justice in court, but justice doesn't stop angry phone calls or mysterious watchers or friends losing their jobs. Maybe Karen was right about one thing. This wasn't over. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with those threatening letters spread out like cards in a losing hand. The handwriting looked familiar somehow, but I couldn't place it. Block letters, careful and deliberate. This wasn't some drunk making idle threats. Someone was planning something. And the scariest part, I had no idea who I could trust anymore. The coffee went cold while I stared at those letters, trying to figure out my next move. Outside, another car drove by slowly, headlights sweeping across my living room wall. It didn't stop, but it didn't need to. The message was clear. You're being watched, you're alone, and your victory in court won't protect you from what comes next. The knock came at 3 a.m, not a polite tap, hard, urgent rapping that yanked me out of restless sleep. I stumbled to the front door in my boxers and t-shirt, heart hammering. Through the peephole, I saw Pastor Hill's face, pale and drawn in the porch light. Behind him stood Tom, shifting from foot to foot like he was late for something important. "Pete, open up. We need to talk." Pastor Hill's voice carried that tone preachers use for bad news, gentle but firm, like he was delivering a terminal diagnosis. I unlocked the door, and they pushed inside without waiting for an invitation. Both men looked wired, eyes darting around my living room like they expected trouble to jump out from behind the couch. "What's going on?" I asked, but Pastor Hill held up his hand for silence. He walked to my front window, pulled the curtain back an inch, and peered out at the street. Tom locked the door behind them, threw the deadbolt. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. "Someone burned down Debbie's apartment tonight," Pastor Hill said, still watching the street. "Fire department's calling it arson. Gasoline poured under her door, lit up like a matchstick." He let the curtain fall. "She's alive, but barely. Smoke inhalation. They got her to the county hospital." The room tilted. I grabbed the back of my couch for support. "Jesus Christ! Will she be okay?" Tom shook his head. "Don't know yet. But, Pete, that's not the worst part." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "Found this tucked under my windshield wiper when I got home from the hospital. Same handwriting as those letters you showed me." I unfolded the paper with shaking hands. Block letters, careful and deliberate. "The old woman talked too much. You're next if you don't pack up and leave town. 48 hours. The paper felt heavy in my hands, like it was made of lead instead of cheap notebook stock. Tom cleared his throat. "Pete, I'm sorry about doubting you before, about the mailbox thing, but this..." He gestured at the letter. "This is way past mailboxes. Someone tried to kill Debbie tonight, and they're coming for you next." Pastor Hill finally turned away from the window. His face looked older, like the last few hours had aged him years. We think we know who's behind it. Karen and Kendra have a brother, Eddie Mitchell, just got out of state prison 2 months ago. Assault, arson, intimidation. He's been staying at their house since the trial. My blood went cold. Prison brother. Of course. I thought about those anonymous phone calls, the careful surveillance, the systematic campaign to isolate me from anyone who might help. This wasn't random neighbor anger. This was professional revenge. Tom sat heavily on my couch. Eddie doesn't care about mailboxes or property lines. His sisters got arrested because of you, and in his mind, that means you need to pay. Debbie was a message. You're the main event. He rubbed his face with both hands. Mark's already gone, by the way. Packed up his truck and left town this afternoon. Didn't even say goodbye. Smart man, I thought. Get out while you still can. But I'd lived in this house for 8 years. This was my home, my life, my ground to defend. Running felt like giving Eddie exactly what he wanted. Another victory for the Mitchell family. So what do? I asked. Call the sheriff? Hide under my bed? Pack up and run like Mark did? Pastor Hill and Tom exchanged a look, something passing between them that I couldn't read. Actually, Pastor Hill said slowly, we might have another option, something Eddie won't expect. He sat down across from me, leaned forward like he was sharing state secrets. But it's risky, and it means trusting us completely. Can you do that? I looked at these two men in my living room at 3 a.m., both of them willing to get involved in something that had already cost Debbie her home and Mark his business. Both of them could have stayed safe, kept their heads down, let me face Eddie Mitchell alone. Instead, they were here, offering help I didn't deserve. What's the plan? I asked. Tom pulled out his cell phone, scrolled through his contacts. My cousin Steve works county dispatch. He owes me a favor from when I fixed his transmission for free. Steve can make sure the right people know where Eddie's going to be tomorrow night, and when. Pastor Hill nodded. But it has to look natural. Can't seem like a setup. Eddie's smart. He survived 5 years in state prison by reading people, spotting traps. He paused. We need him to come after you on our terms, not his. The weight of what they were suggesting hit me. They wanted to use me as bait, draw Eddie Mitchell out into the open where law enforcement could grab him. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. One mistake, one wrong move, and I'd end up like Debbie, or worse. What if it doesn't work? I asked. What if Eddie smells the trap? Tom smiled grimly. Then we better hope you're faster than he is. Outside, a car engine started up. All three of us froze, listening. The engine idled for maybe 30 seconds, then drove away slowly, tires crunching on gravel. When the sound faded, Pastor Hill stood up. He's watching the house, probably has been all night. He moved back to the window, peered out again. We need to move fast. Eddie won't wait much longer. And that's when I realized something that changed everything. Sometimes the only way to end a fight is to start a bigger one. The plan was simple, which made it terrifying. I'd drive to the old quarry road at sunset, alone, carrying a suitcase like I was leaving town for good. Eddie would follow. Men like him can't resist easy prey. Steve from County Dispatch would have units positioned in the woods, close enough to respond but far enough away to stay hidden. Clean, quick, over in minutes. What could go wrong? Everything. I spent the day packing that suitcase, hands shaking every time a car passed the house. Threw in old clothes, some books, a broken radio to give it weight. The whole time, I kept thinking about Debbie in that hospital bed, breathing through a tube because she'd help me. About Mark, driving somewhere far away with everything he owned in the back of a pickup truck. Pastor Hill called at 4. Steve confirmed Eddie's been asking around town about your routines. When you leave for work, when you come home, who visits. He's planning something for tonight. A pause. Pete, you sure about this? We can still call the state police. Let them handle it proper. But proper takes time, and Eddie wasn't interested in waiting. I'm sure, I said, though I wasn't, not even close. The suitcase felt heavier than it should have as I loaded it into my truck. Sunset painted the sky orange and red, colors that reminded me of fire, of Debbie's apartment going up in flames. I drove slowly through town, checking my mirrors. 3rd Street, past the diner where Debbie used to work, Main Street, past Mark's empty rental lot. Every landmark felt like a goodbye. The quarry road was 5 miles out of town, narrow and winding, carved into hillside 30 years ago for gravel mining. Perfect place for an ambush. Thick trees on both sides, no witnesses, plenty of places to dump a body. I'd driven this road 100 times for fishing trips and never thought about how isolated it was. Now, the isolation felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I parked at the old gate, engine ticking as it cooled. The suitcase sat beside me on the passenger seat. Fake evidence of my surrender. Through the windshield, I could see the abandoned quarry pit, full of dark water that reflected the dying sky. Peaceful, quiet, deadly. That's when I heard the rumble of Eddie's truck coming up the road behind me. He drove a black Chevy, jacked up on oversized tires, exhaust pipe growling like an angry dog. Through my side mirror, I watched him park 50 yards back, blocking my escape route. The engine shut off. Car door slammed. Boots on gravel, walking slow and confident. Eddie Mitchell looked exactly like his sisters, but twisted. Same blonde hair, same pale eyes, but everything harder, meaner. Prison tattoos covered his arms. He carried a tire iron in his right hand, tapping it against his leg as he walked. No rush, no hurry. Just a man about to finish some family business. "Pete Reed," he called out, voice carrying across the stillness. "Heard you've been causing trouble for my sisters." I got out of the truck, hands empty, trying to look scared instead of ready. It wasn't hard. My heart was hammering so loud I thought he might hear it. "Just leaving town," I said, nodding toward the suitcase. "No more trouble. You win." Eddie smiled, showing teeth that needed dental work. "Oh, I already won, Pete. Question is how much you're gonna hurt before I'm done." He was 20 yards away, still walking, tire iron swinging. The smart play was to keep talking, buy time for the deputies to get in position. But Eddie didn't look interested in conversation. He looked like a man who'd made up his mind hours ago. "Your sisters lied in court," I said, backing toward the quarry pit. "They destroyed my property, filed false reports. I was just defending myself." Eddie laughed, harsh sound that echoed off the rocks. "My sisters are good girls. You corrupted evidence, bribed witnesses, turned the whole town against them." He stopped walking, raised the tire iron. "Now it's payback time." That's when I realized the fatal flaw in our plan. We'd assumed Eddie was rational, that he cared about evidence or witnesses or getting caught. But looking into his eyes, I saw something else entirely. Pure rage, prison-hardened hate, the kind of anger that doesn't care about consequences. Eddie charged, tire iron raised over his head like an axe. I dove sideways, rolled behind my truck as metal rang against the tailgate where my skull had been a second before. Gravel bit into my palms. The quarry pit yawned behind me. Dark water, 30 feet down, sharp rocks. "Steve!" I shouted, hoping County Dispatch was listening. "Now! Now!" But the woods stayed quiet. No sirens, no backup, no rescue. Just me and Eddie and that tire iron and nowhere left to run. Eddie rounded the truck, breathing hard, eyes wild. "Gonna make this hurt, Pete. Gonna make you scream like that old woman did when her place went up." He swung again, caught me in the ribs, pain exploding through my chest like lightning. I stumbled backward, gasping, feet slipping on loose gravel at the quarry's edge. Eddie grinned, raised the tire iron for a killing blow. And that's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, lots of them, getting closer fast. But Eddie heard them too, and the look on his face told me he wasn't planning to go back to prison alive. Eddie's face twisted into something animal when those sirens cut through the evening air. Not fear, rage, pure, concentrated fury at being outmaneuvered. He looked at me, at the tire iron in his hand, at the quarry pit behind us. And I watched him make a calculation that chilled my blood. If he was going down, he was taking me with him. "You think you're smart," he snarled, spittle flying. "Set me up like some amateur." The sirens were getting closer, maybe 2 minutes out. Eddie hefted the tire iron, tested its weight. 2 minutes is plenty of time to cave in your skull and throw you in that hole. But here's what Eddie didn't know. I'd spent 3 tours in Afghanistan before settling into civilian life. And when someone comes at you with a weapon, you don't think, you react. As he swung that tire iron down toward my head, I stepped inside his reach, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling toward the quarry edge. Eddie caught himself just in time, boots sliding on loose shale. For a second, we stared at each other across 10 feet of rocky ground. His eyes were wide, surprised. Maybe nobody had fought back in prison. Maybe his sister's victims had always just taken it. But I wasn't his sister's victim anymore. "You want to finish this?" I said, picking up a chunk of quarry rock the size of a softball. "Let's finish it." That's when the first sheriff's cruiser crested the hill, red and blue lights painting the rocks like a disco, then another, then a third. Deputy Stevens jumped out with his weapon drawn, shouting commands I couldn't hear over the blood pounding in my ears. Eddie looked at the deputies, looked at me, looked at that dark water 30 feet below. And then he did something I'll never forget as long as I live. He laughed. Not crazy laughter, cold, calculating amusement. Like he'd just realized the punchline to a joke nobody else got. "You think this ends it?" he called out over the sirens. "You think putting me away fixes anything?" He dropped the tire iron, raised his hands in mock surrender. "Pete Reed, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Deputy Stevens cuffed Eddie while 2 other officers secured the scene. Standard procedure, quick and professional. Eddie didn't resist, didn't struggle, just kept smiling that cold smile while they read him his rights. As they loaded him into the cruiser, he turned back one last time. "My sister's got 2 years probation," he said through the window. "I'll get maybe 3 years, out in 18 months with good behavior. But you?" His smile widened. "You'll be looking over your shoulder forever. Because there's always another Eddie Mitchell. Always another phone call, another fire, another dark road." The cruiser pulled away, taillights disappearing into the gathering darkness. Deputy Stevens took my statement, checked my injuries, bruised ribs, scraped hands, nothing serious. "You're lucky," he said, closing his notebook. "Eddie Mitchell's got a history of finishing what he starts. If we hadn't gotten here when we did..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. But as I drove home through empty streets, Eddie's words echoed in my head. This wasn't over. Not really. I'd won this battle, sure. Stopped Eddie, proved the truth about his sisters, gotten some measure of justice. But at what cost? Debbie was still in the hospital. Mark was gone. Business destroyed. The Mitchell family had more friends, more relatives, more people who believed their version of events no matter what any court said. The house felt different when I walked inside. Safer maybe, but also emptier. I poured a glass of whiskey, sat at my kitchen table, and looked out at the twisted remains of my mailbox. Tomorrow, I'd replace it with something simple, standard, completely unremarkable. No more reinforced steel, no more statements. Just a plain box for plain mail. My phone buzzed. Text from Pastor Hill. "Heard it went well. Debbie's awake, asking about you. Doctors say she'll be fine." Good news, the first I'd had in weeks. But underneath the relief was something else. Exhaustion. Bone-deep weariness from fighting battles I'd never asked for. Here's what I learned from that whole mess. Sometimes you win the war, but lose pieces of yourself you can't get back. The mailbox was just the beginning, a stupid petty dispute that spiraled into something darker. Karen and Kendra started it with their tractor and their lies. Eddie escalated it with fire and violence. I finished it with careful planning and controlled rage. But the real victims? Debbie, who lost her home and nearly her life for telling the truth. Mark, who lost his business for providing evidence. Even Tom and Pastor Hill, who risked their reputations to help a neighbor they barely knew. Good people paying the price for other people's evil choices. 3 months later, I got a postcard with no return address. Picture of a beach somewhere warm. On the back, in block letters, "Still watching." I threw it away, but not before noticing my hands were shaking again. Some battles you win, some wars never end. And sometimes the price of victory is learning to live with the fear that the next knock on your door might be the last one you ever answer. But you know what? I'm still here, still fighting, still standing next to that plain, unremarkable mailbox that gets my mail delivered every day without drama. And if another Eddie Mitchell comes looking for trouble, well, I know where to find help when I need it. Sometimes that has to be enough.